Hey,
Hey, how
how's
are
it
you?
going?
I am well. How about you?
Pretty good. Should I try to close the blinds to make that less of like a halo coming up off of me?
Well, I do kind of like the Halo, but I'm going to leave it
Yeah.
up to you. I'm good either way. Go
Okay.
for it. So this is a part of my internship project at the congregation that I am serving, and and it's around the Enneagram. And so I guess some people may not know who you are. So maybe would you give just a little brief introduction of who you are? And yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'm a four.
Oh, all
Um,
right.
I'm going to tell you how special I am. I'm a pastor at Highlands Lutheran Church in Denver. I grew up in Colorado, so I like a lot of the outdoorsy things that you can do here. Um, let's see what
Cool.
else.
No, that's perfect. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I have to ask right off the bat. Uh, there are certain names that get associated with the four, and
Mm.
the name that I utilized with the staff was the romantic.
Oh yes,
Is
yeah. I think the romantic is good.
okay.
I like that. I also like the individualist. When I think about my strengths, I feel like that sums them up pretty well. And that, like, one of my greatest joys in ministry and in life is getting to meet individual people and seeing how the nitty-gritty details of their personalities and life stories kind of give them the gifts that they have and enable them to be the people in the world that they are.
Cool. All right. Yeah.
But I'm also a romantic in that, like, I like grand gestures and
Yeah.
all the feelings.
All right. Okay. Um,
Pastor Nadia Bolsweber was my pastor for a while at House for All Sinners and Saints.
mhm.
And she was how I first learned about the Enneagram.
Ah,
And she liked to describe fours as terminally unique, which I just think is like perfect. And then another phrase that really resonates with me. I was thinking the other day, like, that fours are infatuated with their dark side.
mhm.
Like, it's not just that we have a shadow; it's that we maybe like our shadow more than we like ourselves. Like, it's
Yeah. Well, that goes with being terminally unique, right?
yep,
Sure.
totally.
Especially in, go ahead.
I was going to say, we've never met a feeling we didn't want to feel just a little bit more.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
And so one of the um, pieces that I think is interesting to talk about is things like the wounding message, the healing message, the basic fear, the basic desires. And so let me just read off the ones for the four, and maybe we could chat a little bit about like things that you're like, oh, that's very much me, or no, that's not me at all. Um,
Sure.
so the wounding message for the four is it's not okay to be too functional or too happy, while the healing message is you are seen for who you are. The basic fear is fear of being without identity or personal significance. The basic desire is the desire to be oneself, and sometimes that desire distorts into or deteriorates into self indulgence. So, yeah, I mean, would you mind sharing a little bit about how you identify with that or don't identify with some of those pieces?
Sure. I totally identify with all of it.
Oh, okay.
um, it's interesting to me. I was looking through the wounding message ones,
Yeah.
and it's one that's very subconscious for me.
Okay.
So it's not that I don't identify at all with it. It's that I have to look. It's when I think about times in my life when that message has, when I've felt that, it was mostly when I was a child, and pretty young. It's more of a subconscious thing. It's not huge and in the forefront in my mind most days.
Yeah. Do
Um,
you attribute that at all to um, just you being able to identify those things in yourself, and so you're kind of able to kind of give yourself that healing message that counteracts the wounding message, or yeah, do you give any attribution to why it's not so forefront for you now as it was maybe when you were a child?
yeah, I think part of it has just been learning about the Enneagram, honestly,
Yeah.
and kind of, at least intellectually, deconstructing some of the myths that I had kind of built my identity on. Um, that that it's bad to be normal, or that to be normal is to somehow sell out in some way.
Uh,
Um, that people who look like they have it together are like secretly that there's something deeply wrong with them.
yeah.
um, that basically, I remember thinking when I was in high school, I remember talking with one of my friends and thinking, I went to a high school where kids were expected to be like, kids were expected to be exceptionally functional and
Hmm.
just like overachievers and all the things. And I remember talking with one of my friends, and he and I had a theory. We were kind of social rejects. And we had a theory that everyone who, like, it was normal people who were really dysfunctional and
Hmm.
like had some sort of mental disorder. And we were the only sane ones.
Oh, no,
Um,
I love it.
I
I
mean,
love
it's like the epitome of adolescent arrogance and angst, like all compounded into one.
it. Okay,
Um,
okay, this is where my head goes. We can come back to that first sheet that I shared with the staff, but my head right now, what you're leaning into for me is the passion of the four, that envy,
yeah,
the passion of the four, and it's based on this feeling that something is missing. It's not jealousy, um, but it's because you think, or the fours think, I should say, that other people seem to be more comfortable, and so you're envious of that. Does that also ring true for you? And
yes, absolutely.
okay.
Like, I also remember talking with that friend in high school about like just wishing that I could sit down with one of these other people, and some of them were my friends, these like highly functioning teenagers who were doing all of the right things and seemed to be so happy and relaxed and like not worried about um, any of the bigger questions that I was like constantly wrestling with. Like, I just wanted to be able to give one of them truth serum and be like, really,
Yeah.
what do you think about that? Like, are you really that okay?
Hmm.
um, I've never understood how. I've always felt like there's something wrong with me because I don't feel as at peace or as calm and comfortable as other people appear to be.
Yeah. Uh, well, I mean, thanks for
Yeah.
that vulnerability, because um, that is that's just a hard way to live. Um,
Don't encourage it, Joel. That's
I
what we want to hear. We want to hear the like, whoa,
uh,
that's deep. Like,
okay.
we live for that kind of like.
Okay, so I'm leaning in here to the language of Suzanne Stabile. I've read a couple of her books and gone to some of her workshops, and she talks about the four as the most complex part of the Enneagram, and that one of, I think I'm quoting her correctly here, at least paraphrasing, that we don't, the rest of the people in the world don't get fours. That fours think that we don't get them, and they're right. We don't get them. So, and so there's that. But then there's this other really interesting thing that she says that I am very interested in your thought on this. Her kind of teaching on the fours is that they're the only place in this Enneagram system where can hold someone else's pain without having to fix it. Is that somewhat your experience, that you can hold someone else's pain or grief and you don't have to fix it?
Yeah, I think when I'm operating as my best self, I think
Yeah.
that's true. I actually kind of enjoy it too in a weird
Yeah.
way. Like, I think if I weren't a pastor, I would have become a therapist.
Mhm.
Because it's part of that individual, like, because part of my wound is that no one saw me, or that I never had people mirroring back to me who I felt myself to be, and the feelings and emotions that I was having. It's really powerful and even healing and transformative for me to be able to do that for other people.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge emphasis for me in like hearing where people are at, and trying to understand them for who they are without trying to like fix or hide or smooth over.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting for me. Okay, so I uh, self-identify as a 9, and I think that I have gotten better at receiving and or holding people's pain and not having to fix it. But this is very much something I've had to learn. It's not intuitive to me, and it feels like maybe it's a little more intuitive to you. And that is, I'm guessing, because it's not intuitive to me, that means that's just a blessing you really bring to community and to relationship, and that's immensely cool. And it also means that I think Suzanne Stabile is right, in that we don't get fours. We just don't
Yeah,
get.
I think it's right. I always wince a little bit whenever I hear her say that fours are the most complex.
Ah,
I'm like, oh, it's almost like my coping mechanism as a four is to not believe that about myself. Like, I know that I know that I inherently kind of think that I'm a special snowflake, but it's not helpful for other people to reinforce that.
well, I can at least connect with you in this much, and say that I really don't like it when Suzanne Stabile says that 9s are the least complex.
What?
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Well, I mean, she's entitled to her opinion, and she's certainly studied the Enneagram a lot longer than
It's
I
true.
have. But it is, it's like, oh yeah, I am a pretty basic person, aren't I? Singling out these aspects, I mean, that is part of, um, where the Enneagram, I think, can be a healing thing when we can self-identify with a type.
Yeah.
But at the same time, uh, uh, part of the goal of it is to really see ourselves holistically, which then goes beyond our type. But I don't think you can get there unless you first identify, or it feels to me like until I can really kind of dig deep in my 9ness or your 4ness,
Hmm.
that I won't be able to. That's what will ultimately help me kind of understand some of the other perspectives in the world. So,
Totally.
yeah,
Totally. And I
okay.
feel like that's another thing that comes really easily and naturally to fours as well, is self-awareness. Like, we're never not aware of that.
So then, okay, so for 4s, your needs. You're in that feeling triad, and
Mhm.
you're probably the most in touch with your feelings, right? If 2s, 3s, and 4s, are in that, would you say fours are the ones who are the most kind of in touch with their heart, their feeling?
Yeah, at least most obviously.
Okay.
I mean, I think all of the feeling types have really intense experiences of their own feelings. It's just what we do with them. Fours tend to be the most simple in that, like, we feel our feelings by dwelling on them and
Mm-hmm.
even by amplifying them.
Yes.
And if we're going to avoid something, like most numbers, if you're going to avoid pain, you're going to avoid pain with pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
or at least with numbness. but
Yeah.
but for a four, like, we'll avoid pain by creating other and worse pain so that we don't have to deal with the, like, we're just we're really odd ducks in what we do with our feelings.
So then has the Enneagram helped you then understand that aspect of yourself, so that, say, when you are in pain and or conflicted about something, and you then amplify that you can be like, wait a second, I'm just amplifying this pain to avoid it in some way. Has the Enneagram helped you understand that about yourself?
Yeah, it definitely has.
Wow.
It doesn't lessen my tendency to do it, but there's this thing that, and Suzanne Stabile talks some about this, and Richard Rohr talks about this as well, is kind of like catching yourself in the act
Mm-hmm.
of, once you're able to recognize these patterns that you habitually fall into, it doesn't mean that you'll ever not be your number or that you'll ever stop having these reactions, but sometimes there's this space between when you do it and when you can take a step back and say, oh, this is what's going on. Like, there I am doing that thing again. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily stop doing it, but it at least brings some mindfulness to the moment of, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to let myself do this. Or is it actually really unhelpful for me to, like, go into this tailspin right now?
Mm-hmm. Let's, if you don't mind, a little bit chat
Yeah.
about where you go in stress and where you go in security. Am I remembering correctly that fours go to 2 in stress?
Yeah.
Okay. So what does that look like for you? And also, what does it look like when you go to security, when you go to that 1 position in security?
Yeah. So as a pastor, it's a little bit tricky
Yeah.
to go to a 2 in a time of stress, because I think a lot of people want their pastor to be a 2. They
Yeah.
want them to respond like a 2. They want them to be a people pleaser. Um, they want them to fill their needs. And so sometimes I have to be careful with that,
Mm-hmm.
because I definitely know that when I'm under stress, I am much more likely to overcommit, and to people
Yeah.
please, and to just try to kind of problem solve everything.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, so it sounds like you and I both have at least some of Suzanne Stabile's language in our heads. And
mm,
she talks about the high side of the number that you go to in stress, are if you can take some of those behaviors with you back into your core identity, that those kind of can heal you. So
mm,
the high side of 2 would be, I guess I don't have the language for it. Um, do you identify at all?
compassion,
Yeah.
um, or like service, totally. And I see that in my life, absolutely. Like, in becoming a pastor, I have seen, um, I've experienced a lot of integration as I learn how to do some of those 2 characteristics well.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So then what does it look like in security to go to 1?
Yeah. Well, it can look, there's a higher way it can look and a lower way it can look. The lower way it can look mostly only like family, really, not even so much friends, but really only family sees. And when I go there, I become really nitpicky, and I critique everything, and everything has to be done in a very particular way. And that's just what makes me feel it's very helpful. Security, the language of security is very helpful, because that's a place that I only tend to go to with people who I feel very secure with, which is terrible, because like that's not how you want to treat people that you feel really secure with. But yeah, things are like right or wrong and black and white, which fours are not typically like that at all.
Right. Okay, so that's kind of the low side of one. What does the high side of one look like? And how do you then, am I sensing correctly that high side of one, when you're there in security, gets broadcast beyond family, beyond that close-knit circle?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
When it's the higher side, it comes out, I can see it come out a lot more. I mean, it comes out in my personal life as well, but it definitely, like, I can see it big time in my professional life and kind of in my public life more. And it's being, I would describe it as fours are, we can be so self-indulgent with our own feelings and self-absorbed, whereas ones are like, I won't do something if I don't feel like doing it. And in order to do something, I'll like have to get myself into a mood to do it. So like I'll have my workout music that I listen to get myself into the mood to work out. Or like I'll need to write a sermon, and so I'll like go to my special chair and sit down and like have my tea and do all the things. Whereas ones like just get stuff done. Like they're just industrious, and they make decisions based on the objective good, not always based on like personal subjective good. And so I can definitely see when I'm operating in a healthy place, I'm drawing a lot on one to make good objective decisions.
That's super. Okay, that makes a lot more sense than I thank you. That's perfect.
And I'd say that mostly when I'm like when I'm on the lower one mode, the thing that I relate most to when I'm on that lower end of one is the criticism. It's just I'm just really critical of everyone around me and of myself.
Yep.
Yeah.